Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Research Triangle PowerShell User Group. My name is Mike Kanakis, and tonight I want to welcome back my co-host Phil, who's recovering from a recent car accident, doing much better. I want to also send a thank you out to Mr. Stephen Judd, who stood in his absence and is resting tonight after hurting his arm earlier in the day, asking lots of questions. So thank you to Mr. Judd. How you doing, Phil?
I'm doing well. I'm doing much better now, right?
I'm so glad, so glad. Amazing medical care can do a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah. Hey, I got a question for you.
What's up?
What do you get this question a lot when you are doing stuff with people that are not sort of PowerShell focused? Do you get this question, how can I put a front end on my code? I want to make a front end. How can I make a clicky button or something like that?
I get it all the time. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the most valuable things. They're like, I don't want that console thing. What else can I make with it?
Yeah. So what's your usual go-to solution for that?
Uh, Call somebody else. OpenAI.
I'm a PowerShell Universal guy, but uh,
Think to PowerShell Universal. But actually, my thing is like millionaires to call phone a friend. I think I
yeah.
have a friend
Well,
who I might be
speaking
able to
of
call.
which, I happened to speak to Brundage this week. You know him, right? Pain in the ass. Always got his fingers in a million things. He's like, Mike,
Yes.
you got to check this code out. So I saw some really cool stuff. He figured out a way to do something native in PowerShell that hasn't really been done before. And so tonight, we're going to welcome back a good friend of the show, Mr. James Brundage, whenever he wants to join us here. And tonight, we're going to be talking about how he created a native web server using nothing but PowerShell code in something around 40 or 50 lines of code. And maybe it could even be optimized more. But tonight is not going to be like super duper like finished product. This is check out this proof of concept. Let's figure out where we can go with this. Let's find all the uses for it. But the cool thing is he's figured out a really interesting way to run a web server with only PowerShell. No IS, no Apache, none of those others, no modules you have to install, just straight up native PowerShell code. And from what I hear, um, this little thing that he stumbled across has been around since the early days of PowerShell, and nobody seems to have really taken advantage of it. So, where is Mr. Brundage? Is he here? Where is he? He disappeared. Oh, there he is.
I'm here.
There he
Hey,
is.
how are you, sir?
I'm all
He looks
right.
very angry.
Welcome to the big
I think
show.
that's a very sedate looking bug.
Yeah,
But thank you for having me back. And
yeah,
yeah, this is going to be a little bit interesting and unstructured and hopefully fun. If you're watching from a stream or watching YouTube later, try to watch the comments as well. Add a question or a comment about this. They'll try to get back to me to answer it. This is an info dump night,
yeah. So,
and
so let me just do a
it should
quick
be
setup
very
for you.
interactive.
Let me just do a
Yeah.
quick setup for you because the predominance of people are going to see this on YouTube. And so if you're watching at home, first of all, thanks for joining, checking out our channel and checking out some cool PowerShell stuff. Uh, we are hosting a meetup right now of our user group, and we have about 55 people that are joined with us that will be asking questions throughout the night. And so if you'd like to join us in the future, you can find us on Meetup and you can join us for the future. But James is basically going to be doing a proof of concept tonight. And maybe you're wondering who the hell James is. So I wanted to start with James before we get way off on our tangents. Why don't you give people a little background about who you are and some of the things you've accomplished or things you've done in the community?
Sure. All right. In the who am I category, which
Yeah.
because this
Yeah. I
was
mean, you
thrown
might have a
together,
slide about that, but
no. For once, I
we have a
don't have the who
tendency
am
to
I
jump right
slide.
into the meat and potatoes, right? And so I just want to give you your due diligence, your credit and your props.
All right. Well, thank you for that. For those who aren't familiar, I have been working with PowerShell for a very long time now. I was lucky enough to be on the PowerShell team between 2006 and 2010, basically PowerShell version 2 and 3. And I took quite a liking to the language and have kind of made it my life's work to continue to expand what we can do with PowerShell and to kind of grow the pie of PowerShell so that more and more people can enjoy automating the world. And so that's easier for everybody to do in any sort of thing. So I love making PowerShell because it takes these very complicated concepts and it reduces them to easy to type command lines. And one of the things that I've always kind of known, in fact, I've kind of gone down a couple of very long life journeys attached to this, is that you can take the data of a PowerShell command and you can turn that into a user experience. So even though people think of PowerShell as this, oh, it's just this shell, it's just this terminal thing, it's just this thing I type command lines into, I think of PowerShell and would hope that most people can come to see PowerShell as a very beautiful language full of unique and interesting characteristics. And we're going to use some of them tonight, but overall, my joy of the last, I feel old, 18 years of life at this point, has been waking up every day and figuring out what can I do with PowerShell next, and continuing to kind of push those boundaries and spread the word about what it can do. So,
So, so let me
yeah.
just jump in here and give people a little bit of an insight here. So we have a lot of talented people that join us on this meetup that we host, this user group. What separates James from the others is James has a unique view on how to use PowerShell code. And so what he's done is he's basically found ways to use PowerShell in ways that most people haven't thought about yet. And so I would expect that's probably what we'll see tonight. As a matter of fact, I know that because I was talking to James 3 days ago, and he said you got to try this. And so I ran this on my machine, and I was like, this is pretty interesting. So that's where we're gonna lead in here, and we'll let James sort of take over here. But you should have an open mind for what you're about to see with what we're going to do with PowerShell. It's pushing the boundaries a little bit is the best way to describe it.
Cool. Well, I will try to share a screen.
Yeah,
I
take it
think
away.
I am now doing that. All right. So first, the obligatory, PowerPoint air quotes. I have one slide PowerPoint, actually three if we're counting the intro slide or the demo slide. So we're here to talk about PowerShell web development. My quick air quoted intro, I didn't even add the animations, is, hey, I'm James from Start Automating. I'm here to talk, again, air quotes, because this is a very unprepared info dump, interactive with whoever's present in the meetup talk. I'm here to talk about PowerShell web development, and this was quickly thrown together. So we're going to do an interactive sharing of a bunch of experiments. We're going to build web servers from scratch in PowerShell. And this is the real bonus point to me, at least, maybe to you as well, as you bang your head against your keyboard trying to figure out why your server isn't working, that we can debug. So we're going to figure out how we can write really simple servers in PowerShell that we can debug. We're going to talk about expanding the technique a little bit. We're going to show you a little bit of a visually overloading, possibly, demo of a bunch of cool things thrown together, and then we're going to dissect how that works. Okay?
That sounds fantastic.
All right. Let the demo time commence and, hold on to your butts. So, a while ago, I had figured out that it was possible to throw together a very simple event server in PowerShell.
Could
When I say
we
event
could we
server,
trouble you to go a little larger with the text?
that better?
Yeah, right around there. It's good.
Cool.
Much better, thank you.
So I'm going to show the gist. We're going to show this running. We're going to show it debugging, and then we're going to move on to the fun one. PowerShell events are a language feature that has been around since the early days of PowerShell, since V2. Okay, they are, well, events. They are when things happen, and they can contain senders, event arguments, and message data. Thread jobs are technically a little bit newer, but thread jobs have basically been possible with the PowerShell API since around version 2 as well. The HTTP listener is a built-in .NET class that listens for HTTP requests. So I'm really jumping too far into the weeds, just jump out of the gate here. But the point of this is these few lines set up and start a server. We're actually saying, hey, I'm going to pick a random localhost port between that and that. I'm going to create a listener. I'm going to say I want to listen to prefixes there, and I'm going to start my listener. Okay. Then I've got a little message pump job. Okay. And we can start thread job. Oh, sorry, I don't actually need you right now, Copilot. Thank you. And start thread job. We're going to pass it a few things, although I might just pass the hash table with these things, but I'm going to pass the main run space, the HTTP listener, and the source identifier that I want to use. While I'm listening, I go get context async. This is the next web request. So the HTTP listener is going to kind of continually provide me a pump of these. And I'm doing this little tight loop to make sure that it finishes. If it doesn't work, I error. Otherwise, I get the context. I hate fave icons. They also no longer do as much as they used to. So I'm just stripping those off, and then I'm sending the event. And so here we are at a little bit under line 30, and we have a web server. We're not actually serving content yet, but we have a web server. For serving content, we can just go ahead and create a random number generator. While it's listening, go get any of the events, pick out the context request and response. And in this case, we actually only need to care about the response, but I'm also going to care about this for logging. And I'm going to say, hey, I want to get the next random number, and I want to close out this response with these bytes. And I don't want to wait, I just want to do it now. And then I remove the event. And 42 magical lines later, we have a web server. So I'm going to copy and paste that out to one of the million windows that I have open. And that number will grow as we do this talk. Okay. So let's start off with, looks like I already pasted this in here.
So James, let me ask you one quick question, since this is sort of
Sure.
related to the conversation that we were having before we started the demo, when we were just all chatting. This is all you coming up with ideas, right? This is not you banging away on a ChatGPT to produce this, right? This is all born out of your own ideas and written by hand. Not that that makes a difference, but there's basically no cheat factor here.
There is no cheat factor here.
Right. Okay.
And I
I
don't
think
want
that's
there
fantastic.
to need to be a cheat factor for anybody. That's why I am explaining it before I show it. And here we are with a breakpoint on line 38 where we're going to respond, and I'm going to click this button. And I can go ahead and look at my request, what request URL I had. I can actually even respond early too. It won't care that much because it's PowerShell, and an exception doesn't kill the program, unlike many languages I know. So we're going to say, looky, I responded myself. Okay, so we're going to close the response with the output encoding of this, and we also don't want to wait. Go back to our web page there. Look, I did respond myself, and continue running, and it's probably going to yell at me in a second. Cannot access a disposed object. We don't care. Now, ignore the time it says it took because we were sitting there debugging. Let's take our breakpoint out, and let's see how fast this thing goes. Okay. So first I'm going to do the smell test. Does this seem like it's refreshing fast enough to use as a web page?
Yeah.
You can all basically hear me
How-
clacking on my keyboard hitting
Yes.
control
I was going to
R.
say, how you doing to refresh? It sounds like you're doing it, right?
I'm
Yeah.
literally doing this by hand. I've just got control held down and hitting R. Here are my response times. This is how fast this works. At a primary level. Is this sinking in? Does
Mhm.
everybody see that every request here, the largest one is probably 5 milliseconds. Every request here is in the thousandths of a second category. One of the things that I am told both by PowerShell people and web developers is that PowerShell couldn't possibly be fast enough to be a web language, which I find very ironic considering a lot of the languages used to be web languages are quite slow. But, aside from the shade throwing, badly written PowerShell that does not maintain any degree of state, that goes and refetches the data from some expensive source every time, yeah, that might be a challenge. But if you do it the right way, and I think I finally stumbled upon the right way, it's not.
You're
You
not
can
doing a lot
respond to an
of
event pretty
object
quickly.
work from there too. So granted, it's just responding some stuff. So to your point, is that hey, well, can you get that other stuff to respond fast enough? Can you do all that? Hey, go do a lookup, do some other stuff before it comes back and gives you back output and run from there. Because is it all in a separate thread? Is it just waiting for the other threads?
Good question.
I think that's
This is
where I
where it
was
starts to get really cool. Okay. So first part of this is that you could have multiple copies of the job with the same HTTP listener, at which point you have multiple things listening on the same thread or on multiple threads. So if you needed to scale the intake, if you were getting DDoSed and you wanted to expand out this half first, if you were getting DDoSed and you wanted your message queue to grow faster, then you just throw more listener jobs onto it, because you can have as many threads asking for the next thing in the pipeline, and it'll give it to the first one that asked. And so each of these background jobs will just keep feeding this pump of information to your main run space, to your PowerShell, basically. So that's one way you can scale. And the other one you're kind of realizing or pointing out is, scaling the response. Yeah, I'm doing this in a way that I can debug. I don't need to. I can have multiple background jobs doing the response part of things as well. In fact, if we're going a little bit more brain breaky, they don't even need to be HTTP requests for this to work. I can write a UDP server the same exact way. Or if there was a Bluetooth library, we could use a Bluetooth server. So it's a very flexible technique. You're basically saying, hey, here's a job that is going to be an event pump. You're passing it the run space you're coming from, and you're pumping events to that run space. This also lets you trigger on them. So if I wanted to, I could register object event or engine event this, and then I'd have a web server too. Is this making sense so far?
I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, but I think I'm understanding.
Okay. Who else? What else we got?
Well, here's a good question. Do we really need to understand it, or really need to take what you have and figure out what to do with it next?
That's
a good question. Let's do some more fun things with the next and overload your eyes. I'm going to note, by the way, here is our web server in a PowerShell job. I'm also going to collapse this thing here just to give us more screen rail straight. There we go.
Hey, James.
Yeah.
While you're getting set up, when I was looking at your code, there's like a lot of on my second .NET objects and .NET methods. How much of any of that can be done in pure PowerShell versus doing it this way?
I'm sure there are PowerShell modules that could do this. You can write your own function that could do this. It's more, do you want to do that? It wouldn't necessarily be faster.
Oh yeah, I
And
wasn't thinking about being faster. What I'm thinking about is someone like not nearly as advanced and experienced with PowerShell as you are, looking at this as is this really a PowerShell solution or is this something else? That's kind of where I was thinking.
fair, and let's meet that head on. PowerShell is a .NET scripting language. One of the best things that you can learn about PowerShell is that it is a .NET scripting language. Everything in .NET is there for you to use. If you're running in PowerShell 5.1, that's the old .NET ecosystem. If you're running in PowerShell Core, that's .NET Core. Every .NET example you see on the internet, pretty much, you can run in PowerShell. It's just going to be a question of how bad it is to run. The real joy here is that this doesn't have a dependency or a dependency beyond the .NET framework. So I don't have to download any DLLs here. I don't have to download any modules. I can just throw this up. Again, just a few lines of code here.
I think even in your fashion too is that it's cross-plat because you're just using the .NET HTTP listener, and is that in the other side too? I think it is.
That is correct. Indeed, what I am building here, what we can build in 42 lines of code or less, is basically a way to build web servers cross-platform on PowerShell.
Ryan, you had a question?
Yeah, I've got a kind of a dumb question. I apologize. I know PowerShell is very strongly surrounding .NET, but the one thing I've always struggled to understand is kind of the relationship that PowerShell has to .NET. Like, for example, .NET 9's out. They're working on .NET, 10 and all that stuff, or maybe that ASP.NET. But how does I apologize, but how does that relationship work? So I can, because that will help me to understand more of, what you're doing here with your code.
One of my old colleagues said it well. Microsoft is not a country, it is a nation of city-states. Okay? The .NET team within Microsoft is in one city-state, as it were, and the PowerShell team is in another. The PowerShell team uses what the .NET team produces, but at its own release cycle. So it's not going to go create new things for the .NET framework. The .NET framework is just going to be periodically updated inside of PowerShell. Part of the big thing about .NET Core, and grumpy old programmer me thinks this should have been the way from the beginning, is that it's portable, meaning you can have multiple copies of .NET basically embedded with your application. So it's not a problem if you have one .NET Core 6 and one .NET Core 7 and one .NET Core 8 right nearby each other. Whereas that can be a problem with global assembly caches, which is what .NET was using before Core.
Yeah, but I
Does
also
that sort of answer it?
I mean, yeah, it does definitely kind of help out. I think the biggest thing, and again, I'm thinking, okay, well, down the line, you work this out and you work on an upgrade and you're realizing, oh, well, they made new enhancements in the latest .NET. How do you, is there a way to kind of say, okay, make sure you're referencing this specific, .NET functionality when you're using your code? So I think that's the piece that I'm really, that relationship aspect to it. Hopefully that helps clarify.
It does. It does. one of the things that I'll use as kind of a barometer of how stable something in .NET is I'll go to its, learn.microsoft.com page, and I'll go look at how many different versions are available and how far back they go. Okay? So, this was .NET 5, which is well over a decade ago. I don't want to feel older. But yeah, .NET 5 is quite a while ago that it first came into the .NET framework. It was in the first version of Core, which definitely means it's important. It's been updated slightly since then. But if we go look at, what we have here, it's not going to have changed that much if I go look at 5's version of the thing. These are remarkably stable and very old, and thus very reusable. I mean, here's a good example of just how stable. I would bet you this is one of these things that has changed a little bit over time, that this even exists. But the fact that it's got an unsafe connection NTLM authentication property shows you it's older than NTLM, or as old as NTLM. It's been here a while. It's not going anywhere. I try to build upon code that does not require any external thing to work than just your basic PowerShell installation, if I can.
Before you get on to more things, James, we got 2 other questions queued up. Maybe it's worthwhile to just go to them now. First up
Okay,
is
sure.
Dan. Dan, what's your question?
Well, I had a question, and then Ryan sparked a new one, or not really a question, but something that has bothered me, which is, I think, to his point, like, James, if you just type in $PS version table, just to show that, one thing I've wished PowerShell would have is in here, I wish it would tell you the .NET version that PowerShell is using, because I think that's what you were getting at, Ryan, where, like, if you want to use a .NET object,
Yes,
you don't
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, I might be looking at the .NET 10 docs or the .NET 9 docs, even though the PowerShell version I'm using only supports .NET 8 or 7 or whatever it is, right? So having some place to easily correlate the PowerShell version to the .NET runtime version it's using, I've wished we'd had that for a long time. Maybe there's a different way to get that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if this was in this or not. It's one of
It's
those,
like-
I know where it is, but I always forget it sorts of things.
Yeah, like I know it's easy to find which versions of .NET are on my machine, but I don't know which specific version PowerShell is using, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can offline that, or maybe, I don't know, Sean Wheeler, maybe you know, and you can reply in chat. My question relating to the web stuff that you're showing is, this is pretty awesome, like what you're showing, like you can have a web server up and running, but then this is all running on local host. What would it look like to deploy this? Because like you don't deploy it to IIS or Apache, right? Is it just you put it in, like, I don't know, an Azure container service and just tell it to listen on a specific port? Like, what is it? How do you actually deploy this thing? What does that look like?
I just switched it around to what it would be looking like. Okay, and I'll actually show you for bonus points that as a low rights user, this will complain. I cannot serve to all ports this way. You will actually be doing an HTTP server. You don't need to generally care about HTTPS because Azure Kubernetes service will care about it for you. So you basically just create a Docker file that runs your script, and then you deploy it to Azure.
Yeah, so that was my question, like what hosting service? So you would deploy it as a Docker container. Is what it sounds like, right? So then you would use the Azure container service. I forget the exact name of it, but you would use that. You wouldn't use like an app service or a function or whatever, although you can do functions with PowerShell, I understand. But for this specific thing, you would run it as a container. Okay.
I would run it as a container, and part of the reason I would run it as a container is that it is going to be cheaper than a function. Another reason I would run it as a container is that it is going to be more flexible. Let's go back to what exactly this means here for a second. This means any host. So I can actually have a single server that serves multiple different websites. That's how the internet used to very commonly work. In fact, lots of it still does. But the key to this is understanding that this is how you bind to incoming traffic, and then you look at a header, the host header, to tell you which domain they're asking for. And
We have
that's
one
kind of
more.
that.
We have one more question queued up in the chat whenever you're ready, James.
Sure.
Manas, what's your question?
Hi James, my question is like, is that create any type of service in the background, or it's running any exe file, or just
Nope. This is
just create
pure.
any services?
This is pure PowerShell. If you needed it to run as a Windows service, you could have a Windows service that runs this PowerShell, because you can have a Windows service that runs PowerShell command lines. That's easy enough too.
Or does it create any type of process so that we can check that process?
Oh, so you're saying is there a PID that's assigned to this, right?
Well, so you're
Yeah.
saying that,
I mean,
you're looking for
yeah.
a process, but the process is PowerShell.exe.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks.
So let's keep in mind, just as a reference, this is like bleeding edge, trying to figure out new things. I'm just putting a little disclaimer here. I'm not sure that James has thought of every scenario through 100% yet. Maybe he has, but we went into this tonight knowing that this would be a little rough on the edges, and let's see what happens, and let people throw ideas out, so that just understand we may not have answers for everything. It's a good point you bring up.
Okay. So, moving on from this to something more complicated and philosophical for a second. This part of writing a web server is the easy part. And we're not even going to try to say we can make a beautiful web server. That's a whole other question. We're not trying to be web designers here tonight. But just in terms of serving something completely, you would want to be able to not just handle multiple traffics of multiple domains, but also route requests within the thing. Various languages and various web frameworks do routing various ways. So you might say there's a fixed route like A/B, or you might say there's a route with a variable in it. Like, actually, let's just go to GitHub to show. This is a route with a variable in it. This is my username. This is the gist ID of some form. This is probably a file ID or folder ID. And that is the name of the file. So if I wanted to construct a function that served something like this up, this is kind of the next logical problem. Makes some sense so far? All right, how do I actually route stuff around PowerShell and a web server? How do I make that as easy as I possibly can? How do we realize how flexible this can be? Everybody kind of with me? No is a fine answer. Ask questions if you're not.
I think so.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to get a little noisy, because my answer to this is there is no route table, or at least if you do things right, there doesn't have to be. I'm just going to jump into pure demo mode on this for a second, and I am half sorry for the visual overload, but I do want feedback on it. So we're running. We're going to click our link there, and it's going to start auto refreshing. Everybody seeing this?
Yeah.
Seeing our response times up in the corner or up in the top? Is everybody kind of absorbing parts of what are going on here? I can switch away from this if it's driving anybody visually nuts. That's part of the things I want feedback on, because I want this to be cool, but not the wrong form of overwhelming.
Well, let's kind of clarify what you're trying to go here for. I think
Yeah.
what's happening is you have a module that creates these vectors in the middle, and you're doing shapes and colors and multiple objects on the screen. I think you're basically trying to show here that there's a lot of calculations that are going on to produce this, and it's still really fast.
That is one of the things.
Yeah,
The other thing is there's not any real file.
yeah. It's
This is
not just that
all
James has a
randomly
horrible
generated
sense of
content.
colors, right?
No, it is literally randomly picking a CSS background palette and randomly generating some animation in the middle and randomly generating a bunch of 3D shapes. And all of this without a route table. And let's dive into this a little bit as it continues to run. Manasad asked, have I included C# with my PowerShell scripts? Sometimes, not this time. That's part of the point. Got our same general trick up here, where we're going and creating a random job name and a event pump. I think I'm doing it a little bit differently. Nope, no, I'm not. We can get back to that. I'm telling us that I'm serving, and here's where we get to the first crazy thing. PowerShell functions can be named anything. I can have a function named /. That is legal PowerShell. Thus, I can have a function that is essentially a URL or a URL segment. And in this case, that can actually be what serves up the URL. So this is what's happening every time it hits root. And you can kind of see it from the trace logs, but let's actually look. It's picking a random refresh interval. It's just outputting little chunks of HTML. And I could GPT this or Copilot this or look it up on the internet and copy and paste and tweak. Makes that actually really easy because I can just drop in little portions that work, at least in my opinion. I'm going to go put in a couple headers saying when I'm refreshing, I'm going to dynamically call an image. Oh, yeah, I'm dynamically calling a CSS here too. And then just for, extra giggles, I'm going to go ahead and use an iframe to load up a 3D view. And I can go to any one of these and kind of see them in raw form. So I'm going to go to the SVG one for a second. By the way, you might notice that it's still refreshing the other one in the background. I want to get to how this is working in a second. Actually, let's see what's alphabetically next. I'm pretty sure we've got some simple hits here, like hello world. Random number. PowerShell has aliases, so why not be able to run one with an alias? That works too. I might want to see information about a request, so I can actually kind of do my own debugging here. Oh, request info, I'm sorry. There we go. Ooh, got timestamp cookie for Google Analytics. That's nice. Interesting. So yeah, here's all my request information. I'm gonna go ahead and show my process. While we're at it, actually, I'm gonna say PS version table. This isn't going to work quite yet, but it will when we come back to it. Okay. So I'll stop debugging in a second so we can pick that one up. But here's how my CSS is working. First, picking a random color. Now I want the colors to kind of go together, and here is your little mathy, colory trick of the day. All you need to do is XOR, and you'll get the exact opposite color, and there you go. You have contrast. In fact, you have almost the maximum contrast, depending on how you view the color space. I'm going to go ahead and turn that into a hex color. And here, all we're doing is calling get random. And I'm going to go pick a random background, random foreground. Now, this is cool. This is a little tiny mini script to turn things into CSS. And I'm actually going to decorate this as text CSS here. I can actually tell PowerShell I want to be this content type in a variety of ways, and it can render. And this is the CSS that I'm going to use, which I'm going to express as a couple of ordered hash tables. So I got a body, which has background and color, and uses the same color for links, and takes up 100% of the vertical width and height, and uses Arial because I am uncreative with my fonts today. And turns that into CSS. And that's it. That's how this endpoint works. Infinite palettes in PowerShell, and like few lines of code. How many is that? 95 to 123, so a little bit less than 40. So, and that's our CSS endpoint. And now we're going to go to the pattern endpoint, which is actually an experimental one that I have not shown off. So, hey, let's just go see what I left there and hope it's not too bad. All right, well, demigods wouldn't let me off the night without a hook. So let's move on from that one. Let's go to our actual SVG one. She has that random image. And again, I could use a module for this, but I'm doing pretty close to the same thing. I'm picking a random background color and foreground color. And I'm having a fill and stroke color that I use. And ignore this because I had left some extra code from when I was trying to make the shape a little bit cooler. But right now I'm literally just picking two sets of points to randomly morph to. I'm going to go, yeah, sorry, I thought I left this in better case. Side count there would be between 3 to 6 points. Any given thing, I'm going to pick 3 to 6 random XYs around the center, and I'm going to draw 2 paths. I'm going to do this little bit to represent a color animation. This is just basically inline SVG or scalable vector graphics. I'm going to use my refresh interval. This is where we start to get to cool again. I can share variables between my endpoints. So when you request from root, it's syncing the animation duration that it figured out for that request from root. Isn't that nifty? And I can basically go ahead and tell it to go from one color to another color to another color, and the opposite for fill and stroke. You can do morphing in SVG by basically having an animation that moves from one set of points to another. This would be really long to look at in SVG, like I can view source if you want. But in PowerShell, it's basically just join these 3 lists of points by centimeter or semicolons. You could calculate these points any way you'd like, and congratulations, you know how to build animated SVG with no modules. You just draw paths, or polygons if you wish, and if you wanted to morph them, you animate them. So we're still at line like a little bit less than 200, and then we've got our background and our foreground. This one I haven't shown yet or feel like I'm good with. But yeah, I got a media player in here. I do not do this sort of stuff half-assed. Well, I guess I sort of do, but just by my own twisted definition. I do not want to try to grab a media file, though, and derail stuff and get into the how here too much more than saying it's returning back the file. So all I'm doing here is taking some query, finding a file, and returning the file, and letting that be audio or media. For the random 3D scene, sorry, my voice is a little hoarse this week. For the random 3D scene, I'm doing basically way too much randomness. I'm going between 1 and 16 random shapes, and I'm doing any number of random choices of the type of shape, and then I'm creating little different 3JS geometries of this, and I'm letting them be any number of different materials, and I'm putting them around the screen in random spots, and I'm adding them to a 3D scene. And basically, this is about all you need to set up a 3D scene in JavaScript. And then you could just stick a variable in for whatever is going on the screen or scene. So to be clear, we're covering using PowerShell to serve HTML, using PowerShell to serve CSS, using PowerShell to dynamically generate SVG on the fly, which is 2D graphics, and now using PowerShell to dynamically generate 3D graphics. And looking at those response times to the tune of about 500 a second on this single thread. Are we cool yet? Like, if I go look at a 3D world built in PowerShell, are we cool?
Very
You want to
cool.
tell me in another language that can just do this interactively? So yeah, going further on, I am basically handling the resides of the page, have a bunch of shit that I haven't finished adding all the things for, and am creating the HTML to hold it. And for one more bit of running XX PowerShell bonus points, I am creating the import map by converting to JSON. An import map is going to describe what modules a web page can load. And so this is basically saying I can load anything into 3 or anything in 3/add-ons from here and here respectively. And then I throw in one single JavaScript into my body and I'm done. And down here, we get our listener. I think this thing is less than 500 lines, so I think we're almost at the end here. And we're doing the same thing. We're getting events. And there is no route table. I'm literally saying, do I have a command named star/star? All commands that are star/star are possible routes. I could be saying anything here. I could have it switch based off of host headers or just use a switch statement to do as complicated routing as I'd like. I could have randomization to do A/B testing to send some requests to some endpoint and some requests to another. there are a lot of good unique potentials that are just basically, if we're really kind of distilling what we're learning here today. So you write a script that returns the thing. You write a string that returns the thing. You put that in a function. You call that function when a request comes in. That's it. Is this making sense to everyone? Does everyone get it? How obvious does this seem as we're walking through it?
Elaine had a good question. Sorry, I hope that's how you say your name. First of all, I thought it was cool. I didn't realize you could use a / at the beginning of a function name. But we were wondering, is that required to make that work as part of the URL? The function name has to start with a /, or is that just something you decided to do, or how is that working?
That is one of the simple techniques for routing stuff that I can do. So it's working because, yes, I'm saying it works. It's easy because the URLs are coming in that format anyway. In fact, you'll see I'm doing all of this stuff to go figure out ports and possible different ways to look at it. But right now, I'm only actually using the local path, which will be the /3D or just /. Oh, I guess we went away from the auto recycling one. There we are, back to that. And basically, it can only be a command that is named the local path. If I map the command, in this case, I'm using match to go ahead and find all of them. There are, again, 50 different ways to write this, including much simpler ones than this. If I find one, I'm running it. The little dot here is how they get to share variables. I'm looking at the PS type names to determine if they've set a content type. I'm setting that accordingly. Otherwise, if it's a number and it's in the range of numbers, then it's a status code. And if it's a string, then return it. And if it was bytes, return it. If it's file info, start up another thread job to serve the file. And this except range stuff is basically how you stream large files. I'm going to put a bigger throttle limit on there because I can have many files streaming at once. And if I haven't found anything, 404, and any way that you cut it, remove the event because I don't want to keep running over the same information. So, cool. Understandable.
Yeah, it is understandable.
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right.
All right.
I don't know if I need to, continue in your one-man band demo mode, or if you want to keep whatever presentation going. But we are at the bottom of this file. We can throw together a few other random quick web servers if you'd like, because
I
this
think
is the point.
Some of the feedback
easy.
that it was also, sorry, John, one of the feedbacks that you're looking for, other feedback, is just some, I know you gave a bunch of examples of, usage and, dialogues, what you can do, but even like practical examples of what people want to see. It's like, maybe even, here is a pie chart of, here, it's a glorified web page that gives you, CPU utilization over the next every few minutes, kind of thing. That might be something that people can directly translate to, as opposed to, some things. So I just wanted to give you that feedback, and, hey, what is the memory utilization? Kind of like a web page that gives that kind of stuff, or just some content that you can give back. So I thought that might be some valuable information for you.
Okay.
Yeah, that was raised in the chat just specifically for PowerShell Summit next week. It's going to be like a lot of IT administrators there, right? And seeing graphics is cool and all, like it looks snazzy, but like they said, they might have trouble translating that into how they would use that in their job, in their day-to-day. And so having some real-world examples of things they might actually use at their organization could be helpful.
Okay, cool. That actually is something I don't mind trying to throw together in short order. Let's see if we can do some Mermaid.
I had one quick question, and maybe you mentioned it already, but is this on like an open source GitHub repo somewhere where we can look and poke at it, or is it still?
These are both GIS, and while I am producing a lot of PowerShell web tooling, and I can actually do a bit of song and dance about that before we get into any mermaiding, and probably should. The point of this talk that I'm giving today, the point of the talk that I'm giving at Summit, and one of the points that I'm trying to kind of internalize as I go out to talk about PowerShell is technique is better than tooling. I can tell you, go try to use this tool and magic will happen and it'll do magical things for you. I will build those tools and I'll keep building those tools because it's fun and because it makes things easier for a lot of people. But knowing the little few lines of code underneath that make it work, that's not that hard. And those tools obscure that from you. No matter the type of tool building you're doing, the more complicated it gets around that, the harder it is to kind of keep track of the very fundamentals of how this works. And I wanted everybody to kind of get the fundamentals. I want everybody to get these fundamentals. And the fundamental here is events are great. You can throw up a web server in PowerShell, and you always have been able to. Functions that return HTML or any other content type are just the same as any other functions, and you can route them any way you want. Does this make sense now?
Yep.
Cool. Then I guess segue time. I have been running this new org called PowerShell Web. It's the little logo we've got in the corner. This logo, of course, was built in PowerShell, generating some SVG. I did not do that on the fly, though. So this has a number of different PowerShell and web-oriented repositories, including probably too many private ones that I shouldn't show on a screencast. One of the fun ones is the WebSocket module. And this is fun for all sorts of reasons. This is also the directory I've been in this whole time. But let's have some crazy fun. So first, what we just showed is already nifty enough, but we can get faster than that. Second, there's things that are going on in the broader internet world right now that are in a positive form of flux. That if us PowerShell people, do good things with it in a short period of time, could help really establish the language in that space and help grow all of our potential and jobs. In case you haven't heard about it, in fact, you might have heard about this event on it, there's this thing called Blue Sky. And Blue Sky is built on this thing called App Protocol, which is essentially property bags in the cloud. If you're a PowerShell person, you already know where I'm going with this. PowerShell is great at manipulating property bags. PowerShell is great at creating property bags. PowerShell is great at consuming property bags. So, of course, App Protocol and PowerShell are almost instant wonderful friends. I've started naming modules, at least to some degree, very obviously. And one of the things that I found out with App Protocol is that they have a WebSocket that is either called the Jetstream or the Fire Hose. Technically the Jetstream, colloquially the Fire Hose, and you will see why. So what we're going to go ahead and do here with this built-in thing is we're going to go ask for, let's see, which one will I do? I'll do the emoji and links. So I'll do this. Okay. This is every emoji and hashtag from Blue Sky as it's being said. Do not hate the player, game, or, judge on what is flying across your screen that much. But this is basically an object pipeline of human thought. We can access this really quickly in PowerShell because what we have is a WebSocket job. And I can actually keep on going here and receive more and more objects from the socket, more and more posts. Look at how quickly that's going up. Okay? So it is possible to build at protocol PowerShell stuff in a fairly small amount of code, partially because it's easy to throw together a server in PowerShell, but also because at protocol itself is easy to consume in PowerShell. So I can build something like this that just aggregates data or, otherwise calculates results out of this and send it into whatever PowerShell web server or whatever experience I'd like to concoct. A bit ago, I had, in fact, all through April Fools on and off, I had something watching Blue Sky to pick up as much data as I could, at least on certain areas, and hopefully this won't be too big to render. Type counts. When I say it's an object pipeline of human thought, I mean it's basically a number of different types of objects coming across constantly, telling you information about what people think or are doing. So, you have in the time frame this was running, looks like a little over 1 million likes, 244,000 reposts, 317,000 posts, 228,000 follows. Then you get into stuff that's interesting, like people building their own type of object here entirely. This one I've heard about. It's a music player. There's one that I've seen stop up or show up that's, not public. I'm not going to pronounce the name of one that I just saw fly by. Object pipeline of human thought.
Hey,
Well,
James, it's showing
Yes.
bad requests when I am typing the IP address instead of localhost.
What?
When I just typed the IP address of my local systems instead of localhost with the port number, it's showing bad request.
He's talking about your
Some
web server.
Unix machines prefer to do it as 127.0.0.1. You may if you wish. I'm showing it as localhost because it's easier to comprehend.
or you could try star, and it should respond to anything, possibly.
Yeah, but you need to be running as admin, although on Unix, not as big of a problem. So
I think we could certainly take that offline. But James, I'm always highly impressed with all the stuff that you share with the group, and I think hopefully you've got some feedback initially for what will eventually come out at Summit. And
yeah. I've
go
still got a
from
couple
there.
goodies for you there, because I was going to
Good.
show you a couple of
Good.
new things here, because we had
That's
talked
great.
tooling for a little bit. So what we're going to do here in a few lines of code, we're going to create our socket server, which WebSocket can do now, because that's what happens when you give modules obvious names that are a big area of work, is you're going to endlessly be sucked into, okay, I need this new functionality for WebSockets. And this one at this point can throw me up a server, no problem. In fact, let's go for bonus points here. Let's give it a palette. Sure, I'll go with aardvark blue. We're going to then get a client WebSocket on the same port. And we're going to go send 10 results from the server, or 10 random numbers from the server, and we're going to go get them back from the client. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Taking that back down to its kind of core here. This is the server broadcasting. If I stop at 10. So I just sent 1,000 messages in 0.6 seconds. And for socket clients, I mean, this is kind of cheating because I've actually already got them back, but if I want a web server that is talking quickly back and forth to itself like a game, I can do that in PowerShell too. In fact, I was trying to get some of them together before this, but weekends are long and I'm getting old. So yeah, but here's where we get extra crazy. My server is WebSocket. Keep 778. I'm just randomly picking a thing. If it's already overloaded, oh well. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to provide a route hash table. And we're going to give it that and say hello world. Actually, yeah, that'll do. Okay, root URL is this. Palette name is, let's go with something else. Okay. Hello world, and let's also go with a get process. Select name path. Okay. So we've got 1, 2 routes defined. Everybody seeing the command construct in front of you? Okay. First, let's go open it up. We got our hello world. I should have realized the palette name won't matter the way that I'm doing this, but this is not actually the cool thing that I wanted to show you. So here's my route hash table. Ready? Right now it's hello world. Now it's holy crap. Not only can we write web servers in PowerShell, the next no code, this approach lets us do things with web servers in PowerShell that are unique and innovative and possibly terrifying. Like change them as they're running.
Hey, James, is this just doing like a toString underneath the hood to when it prints it out?
Basically. But that's also up to you. You can directly return the response if you want, or you could do other things with it like frame it.
What tells it that the response is done?
You do.
Is it
So
like
we
as
go
soon as
back
the
to this.
block is finished? Sorry, I'm also
No, it's
late,
okay.
so if you covered it, my bad. I'm sorry.
At the bottom of our code here, what we're doing, sorry, with her, there is no route table. Or actually, here, let's show it here, because this is the anatomy of what's going on. We're taking our response and we're closing it with data. The data needs to be in bytes, so we're using our current output encoding to get the bytes of a string. And this says, I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait for this to complete. I don't want to wait for the response to be fully sent. Just continue on the current thread. And that's it.
This is a question I had earlier, and I'm just going to ask it now. So is there anything that somebody would need to think about as far as the number of sockets to consider when they're doing something like this, when they're either sending or receiving, and potentially also like processes, right? Like or threads that are going on.
I mean, that's a pretty open-ended question. So, you're always going to want to be at least aware of the performance characteristics of whatever box you're on. Maybe get larger nodes if you need them, right? You also want to be mindful of security, and that primarily takes, two forms in my mind. One is running things, at least in a full server-side configuration, in a relatively isolated and secret-free environment. It is quite possible to write quite a bit of your web content that does not require access to a persistent data store in a way that could compromise security. And you should do that. I'm a big fan of, if you're going to do this sort of thing, containers using pure SQL, SQL Azure, and a managed identity that doesn't let you even me know the password. So these things will work. The other one is basically don't be dumb. And that would be stuff like letting a user supply a function they're going to run on your web server, or letting somebody invoke expression, or expanding a string that they provided you, which is basically invoke expression with more characters.
Yeah, that was basically what I had my hand up about. It's like, it's cool that you could just change that route like that, but I was going to say, yeah, you need to worry about, like, just like you have SQL injection, it felt like now we have like PowerShell injection where you need to sanitize any user input.
We've had PowerShell injection for a very long time.
Yeah.
Actually, on one other related note, for the general security concerns about this sort of thing, actually two. One, HTTP listener is a more secure variation of its cousin, which is TCP listener, or UDP listener, either one of those. And two, I do hate to break it to you, but hackers already know how to create reverse shells with just TCP listener or UDP listener. So not going to be anything groundbreakingly, I can do this in a game-changing way for a hacker because they can already do this. You've always been able to host PowerShell in various web servers. This is kind of the point. You can also do it in less than a web server, like a pure TCP request or a UDP request. It's a tricky world out there. So I've got a bit of feedback I want here on one more thing. Although I want to double check that we're letting it soak in how awesome it is that we have WebSockets that we can just pull from and get data from 51,000 things and counting, and how easy it is to build servers that are WebSockets. Everybody with me? Mostly, kind of, not at all. Did my call just drop?
No, you're good. Actually,
Okay.
that's a good question from Clem. You could add TLS to it. Could you add certificates to it and listen on a particular?
You definitely can. Let's take a look at our HTTP listener here. I don't think there's something right out of the box for it, although I'll
confirm
get
that
member.
it works.
But I'm sure that you can make a request that rejects based off of it.
What did you say, Clem?
I said I can confirm it works because I've got it running on my local machine here, just using a dummy cert. But just keep in mind that your cert has to, if you're going to go to it by IP address, your cert would have to have the IP address in it, or you're going to get a cert mismatch warning, and all the other standard TLS related sort of things apply. But the HTTP listener does technically support it. You just also want to make sure that you remove the SSL binding that you're doing with the netsh command that I put as the example at the beginning and end in the chat.
Yeah, I guess where I was trying to figure out is how to bind it. The cert
you have
to
to
the listener.
use netsh to do a binding on the IP and add SSL cert also supports hostname. So I mean, there's examples out there. I just went with what was similar to what James is already showing.
Yeah. The
which
other
is the
thing
IP port.
that I want to kind of highlight here is that by throwing up a server as low rights as localhost on Windows, I'm not letting any other external IPs hit that already in the first place. Plus, you'd have to know that that server exists, guess the right port, and hope that somebody wrote it so that you can invoke expression.
Well, I'm thinking here is if you're putting it inside of a Docker container, you'd want to put it there so it doesn't,
Oh, no, in a Docker container, I'm going to, again, let Azure Kubernetes Service do that for me. So you can have any number of verified domains in a container, and it will route them all to, or on a container app, and it will route them all to that app. And it'll do the SSL for you. And all you need to do is HTTP star. One other thing I was going to point out, though, is that these can be ephemeral. That is to say, because I'm doing this in this current thread, I can stop the listener anytime I want to. I can get rid of it entirely. I can turn my server on and off. So if I wanted to do something like collect form input for a command, nothing else than that. Now, I was thinking about this before this, but I did not get it implemented, but I'm just going to explain the thought process, okay? You would start your little microservice on a randomized port, open a browser to that, write a form for it to show the damn form, and take the returned result back, and then close your server down. And that's that. So, should be really easy to do. We can even try to bare bones that one if you'd like. But that is not the thing I wanted feedback on. That is also probably good to understand. I'm going to go to two different static page work in progresses. Okay. Now, this isn't trying to be forever more deterministic. It's just trying to get feedback onto which feels cooler, better, more natural. Essentially, I've got two ways that I can approach writing PowerShell static sites. One, or two very obvious ways, at least to me. One is that I have a basically blah.extension.ps1 file that generates blah.extension. So I just took the random 3D scene from here, and this is currently running that. So I actually have a build script that hopefully will not complain too much, although it hasn't been fine to me so far. There's our random 3D scene. But this being statically generated is not changing every time. Also means I could throw it into a GitHub page. I can still debug these. Yay for that. Great. So one approach is name of file .extension.ps1. Okay. And I will upload these changes soon enough as proof of concept examples, probably before Summit. But for the moment, as the green indicates, these are untracked. The other one is basically creating one file to build a root URL and getting all commands name that root URL and then literally just running them. which feels nicer or easier to get. A function name layout, or a function name like something PowerShellWeb.com, or an index.html.ps1.
I think having it without the extension is probably more realistic to what users are going to adhere to from a API perspective. Right? If they're making normal calls to an API, they're not going to expect to see a .ps1 on the URI.
Yeah, to be clear, this is statically generating a page in the same sort of ways that we were dynamically generating them. So instead of making any, promise to return this remotely, I'm actually running this, caching its results, generating the static page. So when I ran this, it generated index there, index here, and index here. So your choices are basically having a bunch of functions with names like URLs or whatever else you'd like, or a bunch of scripts. Which one feels more comfortable?
I think the scripts one makes sense to me
Okay.
because people aren't used to seeing function names that are URLs, even though it's legal.
Oh, some form of legal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, James, it looks like you're building the entire web page every single round trip, and I was wondering if you'd thought of scenarios where you might want to have some information that stays on the page while you do some processing, like say, please confirm that this is really what you want to do. You're gathering some information, but your code realizes, oh, okay, let's get a confirmation for this. So you leave the original information back up there, but you have a span or a div or something like that that you update instead of updating the entire page.
There are various ways that's possible with nothing more than pure HTML. And from the caching side on PowerShell's perspective, it's literally just have a variable. Your variable is still going to be the same. If you want to worry about sessions and user affinity, you'll have cookies that will generally identify a person. And if you don't, you can send that cookie the first request.
Got it.
So remember I was talking a bit ago about techniques versus tooling. There are fundamentals about how the internet works that are really obscured to us by tools. And at the end of the day, it is a bunch of keep it simple if you can standards, right? A lot of them really old. Like the host header thing's been that way since early 90s internet, if not earlier. Knowing how these requests work and how to return them and handle things is, I think, good for any web developer because it gives you a better sense of the full stack. This is actually probably going to be something I'll harp on more in Ye Talk, but I kind of have a hate of the term full stack developer, or at least the way it's often carried, because a lot of people sign that term to themselves and they know full stack development in a very narrow range. They know like a stack, and part of that stack is where they specialize, and they don't really understand how things work outside of that stack. I don't mind calling myself a full stack developer because I do. Because I have programmed client and server and databases for a very long time. And there's a lot of fundamentals that frameworks obscure from you. But if you understand those fundamentals, you can do things very easily. Yeah. Also, there's somebody with like nervous drinking GIF in the chat right now. I think, possibly. Sorry if I'm inspiring that in anybody. But yeah, that stuff can be really easy, especially if we ingest how easy it is. And if it's any consolation, I've been doing PowerShell web development for at least 15 years. And it's just hitting me how easy this is. How I would overcomplicate it with tool after tool after tool.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, Mr.
No
James, I
worries.
wanted to ask, you want to wrap it up here?
Wrapping it up here is good. I'm leaving the thing on the screen. You can
Sure.
find these examples at gist.github.com/startautomating, I think.
So, folks, if you made it this long, hey, we got a medal for you. Thank you. You're seeing a little bit of the behind the scenes in real time as James and I work it out here. Tonight was about showing some proof of concept and bleeding edge stuff with how to do some neat stuff within PowerShell with web. And so, Phil, thoughts on what you saw tonight?
I'm always
And
impressed with the stuff that James produces.
Yeah,
I think we even gave some feedback as to other use cases, and that's some of the magic of what's happening is that he brings out ideas, and then what the community comes along with, and it's like, well, I could use it for that, and I could use it for that. So I think you've spurred, or James has certainly, he's not here, spurred a lot of ideas that people can marinate around and make something.
Yeah, there's a lot to comprehend here, right? So there's a lot of ways that this can go, but it's really interesting to see the stuff that James comes up with. As always, first and foremost, we got to say thank you to James for coming and sharing with us tonight. Thank you so much, James. And if you are new to our group or new to our channel, we hope you come back and check us out. You can find us on Meetup. James is also running a user group. You can check out his user group on Meetup, Pacific Northwest PowerShell group. And we got about another 150 videos on our YouTube channel. Everything related to PowerShell. There's at least 5 videos in there on other content James has shared with us. So we hope you enjoyed what you saw tonight. We hope you check out some of our content and you'll come and join us in the future. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks again.
All right, man. I didn't mean